Imagine lying in bed tonight, feeling perfectly normal as you drift off to sleep, only to wake up crushed against your mattress by an invisible force 10 times stronger than what you've known your entire life. This isn't science fiction. This is what would happen if gravity suddenly decided to follow a day-night schedule. It's becoming 10 times more powerful when the sun goes down. At first glance, you might think this sounds manageable. After all, we spend most of our nights lying down anyway, right? But gravity doesn't just affect how heavy you feel, it affects everything. And the consequences would be far more dramatic than you could imagine. Let's start with the most immediate problem: your body. Right now, you weigh whatever you weigh, let's say 150 pounds. The moment the sun sets and this hypothetical night gravity kicks in, you'd suddenly weigh 1,500 pounds. That's like having a small car sitting on your chest. Your bones, which evolved to support your normal weight, would be under crushing stress. Walking would become nearly impossible. Even sitting up in bed would feel like doing an extreme workout, while wearing a suit made of lead. But your personal discomfort would be just the beginning of a much larger catastrophe unfolding across the planet. Every building, every bridge, every structure humanity has ever built was designed with Earth's current gravity in mind. Engineers calculate load-bearing capacities based on predictable forces. When night falls and gravity increases tenfold, every skyscraper would suddenly experience forces it was never designed to handle. The weight of each floor pressing down would multiply instantly. Concrete would crack, steel beams would bend, and within hours, cities around the world would start collapsing like houses of cards. And then there's the water. Our oceans, which currently exert pressure of about 14.7 pounds per square inch at sea level, would suddenly press down with 147 pounds per square inch. Coastal areas would experience something like an instant, invisible tsunami, not from moving water, but from water that suddenly weighs 10 times more. The additional pressure would force seawater inland, flooding coastal regions not through waves, but through sheer gravitational pressure, pushing water into every available space. But that's just the beginning of our water problems. The atmosphere itself would become a crushing weight above us. Our air pressure would increase dramatically, making breathing feel like trying to inhale through a thick blanket. The increased atmospheric pressure would cause weather patterns to go haywire. Clouds, suddenly 10 times heavier, would struggle to stay aloft. Rain wouldn't fall. It would plummet like tiny bullets, each droplet hitting with 10 times the force. A gentle shower would feel like being pelted with BB guns. Meanwhile, every airplane in the sky would face an impossible choice: crash immediately or somehow generate 10 times more lift to stay airborne. Commercial aviation would become impossible during night hours. Pilots caught in the air when darkness falls would experience what amounts to an instantaneous emergency landing, whether they wanted one or not. The biological world would fare no better. Trees, magnificent structures that took decades or centuries to grow, would snap under their own weight. Forests worldwide would collapse every single night, only to somehow need to regrow during the day, except they couldn't, because their root systems would be crushed underground. Animals would face the same crushing weight as humans. Birds would fall from the sky. Large mammals would be pinned to the ground, unable to move. And here's where things get even more interesting. This gravitational nightmare would create a bizarre cycle of destruction and attempted recovery. During the day, when gravity returned to normal, we'd have roughly 12 hours to clean up the devastation from the previous night and prepare for the next gravitational onslaught. Imagine the logistics. Every night, emergency services would need to rescue people trapped under collapsed buildings. Every morning, construction crews would race against time to shore up whatever structures survived. Knowing they'd likely collapse again in just a few hours, society would be forced to adapt in radical ways. We'd become nocturnal in reverse. Everyone would need to find the strongest, lowest shelter possible before sunset. Entire cities would need to be rebuilt underground or in reinforced bunkers. Agriculture would become nearly impossible, as crops would be crushed nightly. Food production would need to happen in specially designed, incredibly strong greenhouses that could withstand the nightly gravitational assault. The economy would restructure around this 12-hour cycle of destruction. Imagine trying to run a business when your building might collapse every night. Insurance companies would either go bankrupt immediately or charge premiums so high that nothing could be insured. The stock market would probably crash permanently within the first week. But perhaps most fascinating would be the technological innovations humanity would be forced to develop. We'd need new materials, new construction techniques, new ways of thinking about architecture and engineering. Maybe we'd develop buildings that could somehow retract or strengthen themselves at sunset, like mechanical flowers closing for the night. Perhaps we'd create pressurized suits for anyone who needed to move around during the night hours. Transportation would be revolutionized too. Imagine cars designed to handle 10 times their normal weight, or perhaps vehicles that could somehow anchor themselves to the ground when darkness falls. Roads would need to be built to withstand crushing pressure every 12 hours. Over time, if humanity survived this nightly gravitational apocalypse, we might even evolve to adapt. Perhaps future humans would be shorter and stockier with much stronger bones and muscles. Maybe we'd develop specialized internal organs that could function under extreme gravitational pressure. But here's the most mind-bending part. The tides would go absolutely berserk. Our ocean tides are currently caused by the moon's gravitational pull, which is relatively weak compared to Earth's gravity. But if Earth's gravity fluctuated dramatically every 12 hours, the oceans would be thrown into chaos. High tide and low tide would become extreme events. Coastal areas that were underwater at night due to increased gravitational pressure would be left high and dry during the day, only to be flooded again each evening. Marine ecosystems would collapse as fish and ocean life struggled to adapt to these wild pressure changes. The moon itself might even be affected. Its orbit around Earth would become unstable as our planet's gravitational pull fluctuated dramatically. Over time, the moon might spiral closer to Earth or drift away, fundamentally changing the dynamics of our planet even further. And if we're thinking really long-term, this day-night gravity cycle would eventually tear the planet apart. The constant stress of expanding and contracting under changing gravitational forces would create massive geological instability. Earthquakes would become a nightly occurrence as the planet's crust adjusted to the changing gravitational stress. Volcanic activity would increase dramatically. Mountain ranges would rise and fall like slow-motion waves. In the end, a world where gravity was 10 times stronger at night wouldn't just be inconvenient. It would be a planet in constant crisis where survival would require a complete reinvention of how we live, build, and think about our relationship with the fundamental forces of nature. Every sunset would bring not peace and rest, but a 12-hour battle against the crushing weight of our own planet. So the next time you're lying comfortably in bed at night, take a moment to appreciate the gentle, consistent pull of gravity that keeps you safely grounded without crushing you into your mattress. Because in a world where gravity followed the clock, a good night's sleep would be the least of our worries.